Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gems podcast. I am so glad you all are here.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Amanda Walkowicz, who is a project engineer at Pratt and Whitney. Amanda, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Laura, and thank you for the opportunity. So I guess I can say that I'm a bit of a mutt as far as where I'm actually from. So born in Southern California, raised in upstate New York, moved around 5 or 6 times for my job, and ultimately ended up down here in Georgia. So got to experience a whole bunch of different places within the company. Engineering has always been at the core of my being since I was very little. I was always that kid that was taking things apart and attempting to put them back together. And as soon as I realized that there was an occupation that got to not only, deal with aircraft, but work on fixing them, optimizing them, and ultimately making them better, I knew that was the career path that I wanted to go after. So it's been an amazing journey. I'm very grateful to be working for Pratt and Whitney, especially at our premier engine center down here in Columbus, Georgia, and really great to be here.
Well, we're so happy to have you in Columbus. And I was going to ask, what brought you to Columbus, but it was engineering.
Correct. Yeah. So it's definitely part of the job for sure. Started in a rotational program straight out of college, and that was definitely something that was outside of my comfort zone. I'm the type of person that likes to travel, but I wasn't that individual that had the travel bug that was visiting a different place every week or every month. So agreeing to go on, a 2-year rotation across 5 different states was definitely a big step, but, honestly, hindsight 2020, looking back on everything, if I had to do it over again, I'm so glad I did opt to take that step because it allowed me to meet different people, to see different things, and obviously gain a much larger perspective of the company and how all of the different satellite facilities within Pratt and Whitney on both the aftermarket and the OEM side work as a whole. And it ultimately led me down here to Georgia, so it really has been a great experience.
So from my understanding, Pratt and Whitney has an internship program for high school students, but you said it was after your undergrad. So what program was that in, or could you explain a little bit about that for kids around my age looking to do what you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So back when I graduated college, leadership development programs were just starting to catch some traction. So GE, as far as I'm aware, was one of the first engineering or STEM-oriented companies, if you will, that started this leadership rotational program, and it was their Edison program. And soon after, multiple other industries started doing the same thing, and other companies. So Lockheed is one, Northrop Grumman is one, Pratt and Whitney is one. So the unique thing about it is I had actually known peripherally about these leadership programs, but depending on the company that you go with, they could be different. Some are 4-year stints, and you go through different orders within the business. Sometimes it's a 2-year stint. Sometimes you have a rotation that's a year long, and some might be 6 months long. So I knew a little bit about the premise of the rotational program, but I wasn't sure what made Pratt & Whitney's program stand out amidst all of the other companies, if you will. And the biggest selling point for me was how hands-on this particular program was. So it was called the Aftermarket Engineering Development Program, or AEDP. So one of the biggest things you'll see in industry is everyone loves their acronyms. Like, quite honestly, every company should publish their own dictionary of acronyms because it's a big part of business. And I soon came to realize that a lot of rotational programs and a lot of terminology would be expressed in acronyms. So the Aftermarket Engineering Development Program was unique in the sense that it was very hands-on. And me personally, being introspective, I'm very much a hands-on learner. And that was really reflected in college when I had to sit through very large lectures. Sometimes there were upwards of 400 people or more in some of my classes, such as physics, even some of the mathematics courses. And I found it really hard for me to focus and retain some of that information because I'm just being lectured at for hours on end. So one of the great things about the AEDP program was that you were completely immersed in the shop environment. You know, you have the ability to work with different cross-functional teams. So you're working with the mechanics, you're working with other engineers, you're directly supporting operations. You get to work with the quality teams and the customer service teams and the materials and supply chain teams. So it was really great to be a part of a program that allowed you to be an active part of the process from start to finish. You know, you weren't confined to a desk where you just had to work on one thing day in and day out. You know, you got to work directly with the people that are making the process happen. And you're an active part of creating that process and optimizing that process. And in doing so, you gain an understanding of what the other support functions do. So it holistically rounds out your understanding of the process and how the business actually functions. So it was really fantastic to find a program that catered to that and, you know, allowed me to immerse myself in something that I was passionate about. So it was really great being able to go into each engineering rotation, serving in a slightly different capacity, but nonetheless hands-on, if you will. So it was really great to be able to directly interface with our products.
Absolutely, and I know that there are girls listening who are very much kinesthetic learners. You know, the auditory and that kind of thing isn't as much their speed, so I think that a lot of people can relate with that. And also, in Columbus, as you know, being by a military base, I think they need to, you know, publish a dictionary for all of us civilians to understand what they're saying. Absolutely. So going throughout your career and your education, was there an apparent gap between male and female roles as you went throughout your journey to become an engineer, whether it be in your education or actually at Pratt and Whitney?
So that's a really good question. So the answer is yes. I wasn't introduced to any female leaders within the STEM realm until I was in college. And for me personally, you know, it wasn't a major setback because I knew I was always passionate about aerospace. I knew it was something that I wanted to immerse myself in. But there's a saying out there that says if you can see it, you can be it. And I find that saying to be very much true because if you see women in power, you see them in, you know, rising levels of responsibility, you know, you can at least see that that's something that you could do. It's something that's attainable. So as I worked my way through college, you know, obviously being a female in engineering, we were greatly outnumbered by our male classmates. But it is something that I am seeing, you know, not only institutions, but, you know, leading industries understanding that there is a gap, you know, and looking and moving more proactively towards gender equality. You know, you should be equally hired for equal work. And you're starting to see a lot more industries addressing that, you know, and it's great to see more women not only in engineering but in aerospace, you know, and I think one of the biggest parts of that is exposure, you know, seeing all of these amazing women that are doing incredible things across the STEM industry. And again, if you can see it, you can absolutely be it. So I really think that, you know, the networking is so important so that we continue to move in the right direction as far as gender equality in these industries.
Absolutely. And by doing things like this, you know, outreach is just closing that gap even more. It's allowing girls to see that, you know, this is what a scientist, this is what an engineer, this is what a mathematician can look like. So, and as you progress through your journey to become an engineer, what influence did you have? Was there a person or like a particular event that drew you into the field?
I wouldn't say it was one particular event. I always did have a passion for it, but I can say, you know, despite the fact that I was probably 19 or 20 years old at the time in college, being able to meet, so many female astronauts, you kind of get starstruck and you're like, wait, I'm an adult, I shouldn't be, fangirling over something like this. But it kind of hits you and you're like, oh my gosh, I am talking to an astronaut. I am actually sitting here face to face, with an astronaut. Same thing goes for meeting, female executives, like Sandy Magnus, who was the president and an executive director of AIAA, which is the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. She was also an astronaut. But just being able to meet all of these women who've made outstanding contributions in the STEM field is really gratifying for me, and I wouldn't say it's one of the things that made me want to be an engineer, but it absolutely reinforces my stance and my passion for engineering and wanting to stay in this field.
So this is a little bit of maybe an unrelated question, but if you could sit down and have lunch with any female in STEM, alive or not, who would it be?
Oh, that is such a good question. There's so many. There's so many on the list. Quite honestly,
I think that one has stumped.
No, go ahead.
That one has stumped a bunch of people. Like, you're not the only one. I think we're all just so incredibly passionate, and it's just like, you're making me pick one? Like you said, there's an entire list of people that you would just love to get that opportunity with.
Right. What I could say, and I know I mentioned her name already, it would be great, to be able to sit down with someone who's pretty much like a corporate CEO or executive like Sandy Magnus. I got to meet her, at a conference, and we were able to talk a little bit about AIAA, STEM K through 12 outreach. But we never really got the opportunity to delve a little bit deeper, to talk about her personal career journey, how she got to where she got, because, her accomplishments are so widely known and widely received, and sometimes it's gratifying, I'm sure, on her end to see that there's people who are already in STEM fields, that are interested to see how she got to where she got, because obviously that road is never easy. Being the president and pretty much CEO of a leading aerospace organization is massive. Being able to say that you're an astronaut is massive. So just being able to hear about that career progression, that journey, what she went through to get where she's at, what she went through to maintain her position and what she currently does now, I would say that would be something I'd definitely be interested in, for sure. But to your point, there are so many women that have paved the way, not only for her, but for people like us as well. So the list is pretty infinite, for sure.
I absolutely agree. And so women that pursue engineering, I guess personally for me growing up, like, I never knew exactly what an engineer was. I would hear there's chemical engineering and then there's aerospace engineering. And so there's all different types. So, like, how would you define what that term means to you?
Ooh, another good question. Quite honestly, I would say that engineering is a mindset. So to your point, there's many different facets of engineering. You've got civil engineers, aerospace engineers, mechanical, electrical, chemical, biomedical, computer, list goes on, right? But if you were to draw, a common denominator between each of the facets of those disciplines, all of us are critical thinkers. All of us are solving problems that, one, some people might not know that we even have, but two, they're relatively complex in nature. And I think that's one of the things, or one of the stigmas, if you will, that may make engineering, quote unquote, seem so daunting. Because you have to go through all of your chemistry and physics. You have to have a really solid understanding of mathematics and its application. So whether you're the type of engineer that's got a creative mind and you design things, or if you're a little bit more like me where you're hands-on and you're integrating engineering principles with manufacturing, At the end of the day, it comes down to being able to think critically, to be able to think outside the box, to be able to leverage your resources, your inputs, how can you fix something with the resources that you have? How can you build upon something to make it better, faster, stronger, you name it, that's never been done before? There's no guiding textbook to say, hey, if you have this problem, these are the steps that you got to take to fix it. That's the great thing about engineering is you have to be able to think critically and you have to be able to leverage all aspects of the equation, if you will, to further optimize a product or make it better. And that's the greatest thing about this industry, so to speak, is because you're constantly pushing the envelope. You're making something better, and it's never been done before. So that's what I would say is probably the most exciting aspect and probably the most relatable item between each of the disciplines.
And as an aerospace engineer and having a better understanding of what that means, what does your day look like? What are your day-to-day operations?
So I'm in a pretty unique role. My background is engineering. My title is an engineer, but I actually serve in a hybrid engineering and operations role. So throughout my time at Pratt and Whitney, I served in multiple different engineering roles, whether I was a manufacturing engineer, a special coatings engineer, a production engineer, process engineer. I'm currently a project engineer / project manager right now. So what that means is not only am I leveraging, my technical aptitudes, but I'm actually overseeing a whole engine line right now. So we have a handful of engines that are coming through our shop, and we call them quick turn engines. So these engines can be closely related to you taking your car to the shop. So when you take it to the shop, it's not like you're trying to get everything done and overhauled on it. There's very specific things that you want done. And the same thing can be applied to these special quick turn engines. So there's very targeted maintenance. It's a specialized team that pretty much oversees the entire operation and then gets these engines in and out in 16 days or less. So what my current job is to not only ensure that, my team of engineers are working each facet of the process, but the mechanics and inspectors on the floor are keeping a close eye on the maintenance and are overhauling everything the way it needs to be. But at the same time, there's an administrative aspect. So I need to make sure that these engines don't disrupt all of the other engines on the floor. So if there's any unforeseen findings, we have to make sure that we as a team address them accordingly so that we don't hold up engines that are behind it in line. Along the same vein, it's also very important to keep in contact with our management teams and our customer service teams. So with any engineering company, the customer should be your main focus. And we always keep the customer updated as to how the engine is progressing through our shop, so that we can help them make their plans and flight reservations on the back end once the engine leaves our shop. So it's really, high level, a very cross-collaborative role where I'm working closely with engineering, the support shop teams on the floor, on maintaining the pulse of the engine. So that means I'm very closely integrated within our operations team, and also leveraging our customer service and supply chain teams as well to make sure that these engines are moving smoothly. And I guess the more exciting aspect as well is being in this role, and overseeing this line. These engines go to other engine centers within our network as well. So it's awesome being able to share best practices and support other engine centers within the network that are all around the world. It's great to be able to talk to the teams that we have in Europe, in Asia as well. So it's really great to be able to get that global experience as well.
And these quick turn engines, what type of, vehicles are they used in?
So these are commercial aircraft engines. So these are the engines that you would see on any plane that you would go on for vacation or business travel.
And the process of, repairing them in 16 days, does every 16 days consist of the same checks and the same fixes, or does every single engine require something different, something new?
So the bare bones structure of these engines, the maintenance is pretty much the same. However, these engines are coming from all over the world. So different environments, different climates, different amount of time on wing, all pave way to its own unique set of wears and tears. So there are always additional finds that we find on each of these engines. And that's just the nature of the game. Some have been on aircraft a lot longer than others. Some have been flying through cooler climates than others. Some have been going through really dry or sandy environments. So that obviously has its own implications on the components of the engine. So bare bone structure, yes, they're coming in for the same things, but there is always something extra that we find that we also have to address.
That's really interesting. I guess I never would have thought about how the geography of a region really does affect those types of machines. So that's super interesting. So you mentioned a couple of projects that you had worked on in your 2-year program in your undergraduate education, I think. And so you mentioned plasma spray operations. And I have no idea what that means. So could you just explain that for us?
Sure. I can't get too nitty-gritty into the details, but high level, there's multiple different types of coatings that exist out there. And essentially what plasma spray does is it's a very specific type of coating. You don't only see it on aircraft components, but it's abradable. So a lot of components on jet engines move very quickly, and some of them get very hot. So in order to make sure that those specific components last throughout their intended lifetime, and don't break down or don't run any risk of getting damaged, you have to apply a very specific type of coating to those parts to make sure that it can withstand whether it's strength factors, heat factors, any sort of tensile testing, stress and strain. So plasma spray is just one of many different types of coatings that you can use to preserve the lifetime of those specific components.
And you've worked on a bunch of different projects, so you're talking about that aspect, but 3D printing and welding and things like that. You have so many, and just talking about your day-to-day operations, you have so many facets and you have so many hats that you're juggling. What would you like to, what do you focus on, or what gives you what are you most passionate about?
Sure. And I can say too, the resume of different projects was definitely a result of the rotational program, and that's what makes these leadership development programs so unique, is you're gaining so much knowledge and experience. People often say you're drinking from the fire hose. That's exactly what happens in rotational programs, because you're there for such a short amount of time, 6 months, 8 months, even a year sometimes, where you really got to hit the ground running. And you have to be able to make an impact, but also you may or may not be able to see the results of your efforts. And being in such a compressed time frame and going through different business units has allowed me to delve into so many different things. So at the very end, it's only been 2 years, but you've really gained pretty much 5 years experience, because once you finally place out into a rotation, you've got the knowledge and experience of 5 different business units on both sides of the business, compared to someone that may have been in the same role for maybe 3 years. So that individual may know the ins and outs of that exact role, but what's happening upstream, downstream, what support teams are doing, how that product functions. So I know it seems like a lot, but it's absolutely a result of the rotational program. So as far as what I'm most passionate about, I really enjoy this hybrid role right now, because not to say that engineering can be siloed, But when you're an engineer, you may not always have the opportunity to see how the bigger part of the business functions. You are so immersed in the technical aspect of the product, it's not like you're going to be pulled into what the customer is dealing with or what our customer service team is dealing with or what top-level management is having to deal with. So it's always great to be able to see that perspective and further see the many ways that your contributions are affecting the business as a whole. Sometimes it's not that readily transparent as to what the discussions the VPs are having or what some of the associate directors are having, So it's really great to be in a dynamic role to see how, not only me, but really more so my team, how their actions and what their day in and day out activities are doing to not only benefit our site and our company, but the customer and the fleet as a whole. So the biggest thing for me is being able to see that, we're making a difference and that, our actions and our efforts, are bettering not only the aerospace community, but, our global community as well. So that's the biggest thing for me is seeing that everything that we're putting into these engines and these various projects or whatever it may be is having such a positive impact on everything else.
And I think that it's an incredible opportunity to be able to gain that knowledge so quickly and then be in a role that you are and see both sides of it. And as you urge that opportunity to gain that knowledge, what other advice might you have for girls that are looking into engineering or just STEM in general?
Sure. Honestly, hindsight 2020, don't be afraid to ask questions. There's in college, there were those professors, or at least my personal experience, that had a such thing as a stupid question. They'd look at you and they're like, why did you ask that? But honestly, do not be afraid to ask questions, no matter how big or small they may be, because the biggest thing that's going to make you marketable and that's going to make you stand out from everybody else is not only your knowledge, but how you apply that knowledge. What makes you different? Knowledge is power, So if you're someone that is passionate about something, that wants to know the ins and outs of how it works, you've already given yourself a leg up compared to the person that maybe studied just enough to get through an exam. Did the knowledge that they absorbed, is it something that's actually applicable? Can they go and take that and apply it to something else, or did they just learn just enough to get them through it? So first and foremost, do not be afraid to ask questions. The second thing I would say is be confident. And I know sometimes that's very difficult to do, especially, if you're in a situation where you're surrounded with people that may have 20, 30 years experience on you. You may not have the subject matter knowledge that they have, but you also provide a different perspective that they may or may not have seen. And some people can chalk it up to generational gaps and whatnot, but you have your own unique perspective. So do not be afraid to be the person that speaks up in a meeting. Don't be afraid to offer your opinion. And honestly, be confident when you speak as well, because you're an engineer, you're in STEM, you know what you're talking about. But along the same vein, to also be very humble and open and receptive to feedback. And from personal, observation, that's something that I have seen personally hold some people back, where people take everything very personally, or someone gives them a suggestion or gives them some feedback and they shut down. And honestly, that is one thing that will severely hold you back from growing as a person and growing as a leader. So being confident where it counts, but also being humble through opportunity and through feedback.
Thank you so much. And as we come to a close, I just want to thank you for your time and willingness to join us today and paving the way for women in STEM and in engineering. So thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Oh, anytime. Thank you so much, Laura. Very happy to be a part of it. I think what you guys are doing is absolutely fantastic. I think it's a great initiative.
Thank you. And so I have written the women that I've interviewed thank you notes. Do you have an address I can send it to, or a P.O. box or something like that?
Yeah, I can absolutely send that to you. No problem at all.
Okay, and and also I just want to make sure this is okay. We are going to post your portrait on our social media, your headshot, but what we've done for the women is had some girls a part of gyms do some artwork of you, and I just want to make sure that's okay, and I'll send you anything or everything that we post of you. It is coming your way.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
No, that would be perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much again, and it was so nice to meet you.
Thank you. Same goes to you.
Have a wonderful week.
Thank you. You as well. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact us through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Colga Gems. You can also reach us through email. Our email is colgagems@gmail.com. That is COLGAGEMS. And I'll see y'all next time.